Hello, everyone. Welcome to Travelroo's Hop into Australia YouTube channel. As we continue our series of Zoom conversations, today Dave Siddon joins us to talk about Wildlife Images, an amazing wildlife educational and rehabilitation center in Merlin, Oregon. Hey, Dave. Thanks for joining us on our Zoom conversations on Hop into Australia. How are you doing today?
I'm terrific. How about you?
I can't complain. Life's pretty good. Just navigating through this pandemic and just trying to maintain normalcy, I guess, right?
Yeah, whatever normalcy is now.
Yeah, there's I think a new definition to that. So,
Yeah.
we'll get right into it.
All right.
You're Dave Siddon. You're with Wildlife Images up in Merlin, Oregon. So Wildlife Images was founded in 1981 by your father, Dave Siddon Sr. How did Wildlife Images begin, and what was the initial mission when your father started this amazing facility?
Well, it began more by accident than by design. My dad was a writer and a filmmaker, worked primarily on documentary films centered around the environment and wild animals. And at one time, of course, we were living in Los Angeles, where film capital of the world is. And at one point, he just got tired of the congestion and hassles of everyday life in a metropolitan area like LA and decided, I could live pretty much anywhere and do what I'm doing. And sort of found the property up here in Oregon in a kind of a happenstance way. So 17 acres on the Rogue River. And so he bought it sight unseen, just saw a couple little Polaroid pictures of it and bought the property and decided let's move up there. And so we always had hawks and eagles and owls and things at home all as long as I could remember. And so in the process of moving across state lines in the US, you have to acquire permits, federal and state permits to come across state lines with federally protected wildlife. So in doing so, these permits come across the desk of the local sheriff, the state police, all the different agencies locally. And so these guys want to come out and check out, why is this guy moving in the area with eagles and hawks and all that? So they came out and met my father. This is a guy that's bigger than life, a big booming voice and 1,000 stories to tell. And something clicked with them. They said, gosh, next time we get an injured animal, let's just take it to him. And so that began in 73 or 4. And the animals started coming in, a small nest of jays first, and then maybe in a small raccoon and this or that. By 1981, it had become such an unwieldy beast that my father decided to found a nonprofit so he could take in donations to try to keep the place afloat because it was getting too expensive to do out of his back pocket. So he hated the idea of forming a nonprofit because that meant a board, and he was an autocrat. The idea of taking directions from somebody else horrified him. So anyway, reluctantly, he started the nonprofit in 1981, Wildlife Images, and it has just been growing ever since. So there's a real need in this area for somebody that will care for the wildlife that is basically forgotten.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area up there in the northwest. Well, really southern Oregon. For people that live here in the bottom southwest, it's the great north for us. So yeah, it's a beautiful area up there and amazing animals, wildlife. Just even in the short time that usually I'm there in the area, it's just always a very, I don't know, for me, it's more relaxing, not surrounded by skyscrapers and busy highways, just a backcountry road like where I'm from in central Pennsylvania. And as you said, the Rogue River, it's a beautiful, beautiful place up there. So speaking of in the wild year that was 2020, Wildlife Images treated 1,277 wildlife patients. This was a record number of animals that you guys saw and treated for the in the history of Wildlife Images. So how does your facility operate and receive funding to treat these amazing animals of the great Northwest United States?
Well, the animals are received from just Joe Public, basically, or groups like the Sheriff's Department, the State Fish and Wildlife. All these people bring us animals as well. And it's funded solely through individual donations. We don't get any help from state or federal authorities one way or another. So we have to raise every dime that it takes to take care of these animals. And of course, the people that bring us the animals, they aren't charged for anything either. So we absorb the cost of veterinarians, all the drugs, all the people it takes for conducting whatever it is to get these guys back out in the wild. And sometimes we have long patients that are going to be in care for a long, long time and are very expensive. We have a fisher right now that came in with a spinal injury. And they're very rare. Rarely see them. They're like a big ferret, basically, you know, much bigger ferret. Very quick and agile and fast in the brush and everything. And but they're very, very rare in this area. And we got one in with a spinal trauma, as I said. Didn't have any breaks, but it's been in recovery now for 3 months, and it's been going through therapy with our personnel and all that. So the number of man hours you have in that one animal could be just horrendous. And others, of course, sometimes are baby birds that, you know, within 6 or 8 weeks are ready to go out on their own and off they go. So there may be some that become, you know, here for 2 or 3 years. Some of them might be just 2 or 3 weeks. So it's quite a diverse collection of just about any kind of critter you can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I know from previous conversations I've had with you there at the facility, you guys sometimes take animals that can't be re-released into the wild. The goal is obviously to re-release them back out into the wild, but the ones that can't turn into your epic animal ambassadors there at the educational center. And I think that's a really cool concept, you know, like being able to turn it into from a bad situation to something good for the animal, to be able to educate everybody on these amazing species that I feel somewhat we don't take we don't take it for granted that we have these amazing animals that are right in our backyard.
Yeah, I think it's really important. You know, becoming ambassador animals, I think, is a huge part to taking a life that would have been just basically gone and turning it into something positive is, I think, a big goal of ours, to make sure that people have the chance to learn from these things. And people care about things that they've experienced or they have feelings towards. And you don't get feelings towards things by looking at them in a book or watching a video sometimes. It sometimes takes that personal touch to get you involved with an animal to care for them. And, you know, these are the people that we hope will become conscientious voters. It'll do a better job of stewardship in our environment and care more about wildlife and do more for donating towards causes that can support wildlife and make it an important part of their future generations' life. And they're, of course, going to be the voters too. They're going to make a big difference in the future.
Exactly. So in 2020, Wildlife Images welcomed just under 15,000 visitors to the facility to interact with approximately 86 animal ambassadors. Is there anything visitors can expect for 2021 at Wildlife Images?
Well, yeah, we're going to work harder on the close encounters. Basically, the idea is that everybody that comes in the gate should be able to have a personal encounter with animals of one sort or another. So it might be one of the wolves walking around. It could be somebody carrying a skunk around. It could be any number of our raptors, from eagles to hawks to whatever they could be. And it's a model that I think some of the more progressive zoological institutions worldwide have been doing for years. And we've been trying to do that too. In fact, when I worked at the Oregon Zoo I worked there 12 years, about 25 years ago. And we were doing it back there then. And it put a whole different spin on people coming in and seeing animals. You know, Terry and the people at the Australia Zoo do a magnificent job with that as well. You know, you walk around the zoo and there's a dingo or there's a cheetah or there's something around that the public can interact with. And it's a marvelous thing. And we want to work harder on doing that. The hard part is our laws are way more restrictive here than they are in Australia.
That is very true.
So we have a bit of an uphill climb that way.
Yeah, definitely. During one of Travel Roo's visits to Wildlife Images in the fall of 2020, we got to see a new program that was created by Wildlife Images called Wildlife Academy Critter Campus, where it gave students the opportunity for some hands-on learning during the unfortunate pandemic that is COVID-19 and its impact on education. Can you tell us how the program was received by parents and students that attended this unique opportunity that was in its, I believe, in its first year?
Yeah, it is the first year, and it's been pretty successful. You know, we haven't had as much attendance as we thought we'd have, but it's mostly because the school system up here is trying to figure out what they're going to do with this COVID thing. You know, they get an edict from the governor, let's start the schools again, and kids get all ready for it, and then next week it's shut down. And so this on again, off again thing, which is just part of the learning about this COVID thing, has been tough for people to anticipate and gear up for. But we've had the students that have participated in the program have loved it. I mean, what better a thing that you're sitting there at your computer working on your lesson and you get a visit from a wolf or any other wild animal that you could get experience with directly. It's pretty cool atmosphere, and it's very conducive to learning. And you know, for the parents that are stuck with a situation where, you know, you've got to go to work and make a living, but what are you going to do with your kids that can't go to the school? It's made a real viable alternative for the people locally to be able to bring their kids to a place where we have teachers and instruction and the internet capacity for them to get on the computer, keep up with their classwork and all that. So it's been a really, really great thing. And I think in time it'll catch on more and more.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, we were there, and you know, I just thought it was a unique opportunity. Like you said, it's like, especially like here in Arizona, we have the same kind of situation where it's 1 month they're going to school, then the next month they're not. And it is a fluidly changing situation with COVID-19 and the pandemic. But I just thought it was a really cool hands-on opportunity for kids to have something different. I certainly would have loved to have an opportunity like that to come to a facility and be able to interact with some of the most majestic animals in our country. You know, like bald eagles, getting to see one, you know, up close. I'd only seen them in pictures and at a very far with binoculars, where I used to live. And it was very rare when you did see them. So you took in that, but I just thought it was a really cool, unique opportunity for students up there in Oregon to take in something different, for a change.
It is. I don't know where else they duplicate that experience. So it does make us very, very unique.
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully the program will grow, and it'll be something that can continue maybe as a summer program or something like that, probably.
Absolutely. Yeah, we do operate a summer camp. We call it Camp EEK, which is Environmental Education and Kids. And so that'll continue into the Camp EEK probably as well.
Very cool. So obviously we have a unique mutual friend, or friends, I should say. As one of Travel Roo's favorite dates every year, Travel Roo, recently we traveled up to Wildlife Images to celebrate in the Steve Irwin Day on November 15th. Wildlife Images hosted an amazing event remembering and honoring the life of the legend Steve Irwin, who was a good friend of yours through his amazing wife, Terry, who is from just up in the road in Eugene, Oregon. Can you tell us about your personal friendship with Steve and Terry, and you know, just how that friendship has blossomed over the years?
Look, yeah, certainly. Yeah, Terry and I have been friends for, I think when last time we were together, we were trying to add it up. It's 35 plus years. I think we've been friends. Can't be that old, but anyway, it's been a long, long time. And we both had a mutual love for cougars and wildlife and education and all that. And when she went to Australia to visit and ran into this wild guy down there named Steve, and decided to move down there, she contacted us and said, "Hey, she had a cougar at the time named Melina that she was doing educational work with, and asked if we'd be willing to take Melina on and keep safeguard Melina for her when she moved to Australia." So of course we did, and we had Melina here for 4 or 5 years, and finally she, passed away due to, being an older cougar, and that sort of thing happened. So anyway, after when they brought Melina here, Steve was part of the process bringing Melina down here, so I got to meet him when they brought Melina down and spend some time for him, and we hit it off immediately. He and I, our backgrounds parallel one another very closely. Our dads were both wildlife junkies, and started a park that we sort of inherited and ended up taking over. And so we had a lot of similarities and a lot of common ground to base our relationship on. And he was always a pleasure to be around. And it was interesting because he'd been around primarily reptiles. And the first time that I met him, we were dealing with some baby bear cubs, just little guys, this big or whatever. And we were hand feeding the bear cubs bottles and everything. And he was a little bit standoffish and a little bit uncomfortable with the bear cubs. And I think in retrospect, looking at it, it wasn't that he was afraid of them. He just thought they'd get hurt, because they look fragile compared to a crocodile or whatever he's used to dealing with. And he had no idea how tough bear cubs were until he'd spent 15 or 20 minutes with them. And then he kind of got a new appreciation for how tough these little dudes are. And in fact, one of them took off and went scurrying up a tree that we were sitting under at the time. And he goes, "Want me to go up and get it?" And it's like, "Yeah, sure." So he scurried up the tree after the bear and grabbed the little bear cub and handed it back down to me. So he got over that and he sat in a tub with our otter and did some other things to interact with the animals. And so he fit in here just perfectly. And it was interesting though, when we'd go out to dinner or lunch or whatever, he was pretty shy when it came to things like that. The public would approach him and, recognize him and approach him and all that. He was a little bit shy about that. I was surprised, but he wasn't the wild and outgoing person that you saw on film oftentimes in person. He was a little bit more withdrawn than that. And but his film presence came across very, very well and made for great TV. So he did a beautiful job of keeping the two together.
Yeah, I never got to meet Steve in person, but from what I've gathered from reading Terry's book, and several other stories from people that have interacted or knew Steve, it sounds like he was just the standard, as they say it in Australia, the standard bloke. Just a nice guy. And I heard that he was very, like you said, he was very shy. Like he wasn't one for all the spotlight. His goal was to help save wildlife and conservation. And, I think the world is better off for having Steve be impacted by, I remember growing up on Saturday mornings, the Croc Hunter would be on TV. And that's something I watched, for several years growing up. And, it's just really cool that you guys had an opportunity with Terry being a close friend of yours. And then also when Terry went down to Australia and met Steve there at the Queensland Fauna Park, it was how she ended up marrying Steve. And then, how Bindi and Chandler now met kind of in the same way down there. So pretty cool. And you guys just recently unveiled 2 new park features, I guess, in the sense. You guys have Bindi's Creek, the pavilion, and then you guys have Robert's Reptile, the reptile barn, I think it is. If I'm mistaken on the name, I apologize.
Yeah, so the reptile room is, Terry and I have had many conversations, and recently she was going to make a donation to wildlife images from the Wildlife Warriors, which is hugely appreciated.
Yeah.
And she asked if there was a chance we could name something for Bindi. And I think she's very proud of Bindi and the process of being a grandma in the near future.
Yeah.
I kid her relentlessly about that. Anyway, I was trying to think of what would be an area that would be worthy of Bindi, being named for Bindi. And Critter Creek is our area that is the most completed and probably the most aesthetically pleasing area here on the park right now. So we dedicated that to Bindi, and it's Bindi's Critter Creek now. And then I didn't want to leave Robert out. He's just such a good guy, and I've known both of them, from the time they were first hatched. They're a little bitty dudes. And so Robert's reptile room seemed to fit perfectly. We were getting ready to repurpose a room here. And so as a surprise to Terry, we put together Robert's reptile room and dedicated that at the same day on Steve Irwin Day on November 15th this last year. So it's real nice to be able to do something like that and represent those guys, because they are so close to their family to us. And, we've been lucky enough to go spend several weeks with them in Australia, and their hospitality and everything was amazing. And their facility has just hurt your eyes beautiful. It's an incredible place. And, and I really love Terry's continuation of Steve's legacy. Steve, I think one thing that I appreciated probably more than anything else, he lived his values, and what he did in real life is what he talked about on the air. And I think more of that needs to happen. We need to get more people that are really going to not only express a feeling, but live it, make it part of their life. I was lucky enough to grow up at a time when we had Jacques Cousteau's amazing world and all the things that he used to do. Is probably before your time, but there were a set of documentaries that traveled all over the world and involved in the ocean and diving and all that. And my early career, I trained killer whales and dolphins and worked at SeaWorld and did a lot of that stuff. So I could really relate to that as well. Spent a lot of time underwater. And Steve and Terry, from the time Jacques Cousteau stopped, there was a big gap there. And the Crocodile Hunter kind of filled that gap for a while with the idea that there's an educational program out there that was interesting and engaging and traveled worldwide and got people into it. And I know some people got into their show for probably the wrong reasons. I don't want to see him getting bit by a deadly snake or whatever.
Yeah.
But I know some people personally that didn't give a poop about wildlife that started watching that show probably for that reason and became real wildlife advocates. And so if you can make that difference, that's a huge, huge thing for the public and the future of this planet.
Yeah, I mean, I really agree with you there. We need more authentic role models that live and breathe what they actually care about. And that's one thing that has, I guess, attracted me to the Irwin family, is just that they're so transparent. Like, it's not, it's not a gimmick or a show. They're the same people, and you meet them in real life as you see on the TV show. Crikey, it's the Irwins. I think they're getting ready to release that here shortly, season 3. So excited to see all the new adventures from afar, since we unfortunately can't get into Australia. But thank you for sharing those unique stories from Steve and Terry. So in I guess our final portion of this interview, how can our viewers and our listeners help support Wildlife Images and you guys' amazing mission that you take on up there in Merlin, Oregon?
Well, of course, our biggest need always is financial support. It becomes harder and harder to generate the funds necessary to keep a place afloat. It's our expenses keep going exponentially, and unfortunately, our income does not keep pace with that. Grants are more difficult than they've ever been to get because there's so much more need for human funding for human purposes right now that the wildlife's getting a smaller cut of that pie now. And so grants are tougher. Funding in general is really, really tough. So, and get involved, subscribe to the magazines about wildlife. If you can volunteer, think about estate planning. That's been a huge thing for us. If people put us in their estate planning, we never know when those gifts come, but they've made a huge difference. They've saved our bacon many times. So those are some of the things. But become conscientious voters, and the environment matters. This is the world we're going to be handing to our future generations. And even birds know better than to poop in their own nests. We ought to be thinking about the same thing. We should do a better job of taking care of this planet. It's the future for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, again, that area up there, if you've never been to Oregon, you definitely got to put it on your list. I had never been there up until this past year. It's a beautiful area, and again, taking care of the wildlife that we have here in North America and in the United States. We need to be better servants, I guess, in the sense like of taking care of our earth that we have, because every day you see something new coming out of with global warming and all that. So we certainly do appreciate everything you guys do up there at Wildlife Images. And here at Travel Roo, we just want to say we're proud to support you guys and the work that you do there at Wildlife Images. Dave, I want to thank you so much for joining us today here on Zoom Conversations with Hop into Australia.
Well, glad to do it. It's been a chunk of heaven.
Yes, definitely.